Okay, that's what I was saying. Okay, it's going that way.
Okay.
I find it.
Okay.
And where do we look when we
Yes, because I don't have my profile on there, so.
That's what I do.
I think the intro is the hardest part.
Take my one.
There's Mike, if he takes a picture.
And where should we look when we're answering? Do we look at
picture
you or we look
and
at
mailed
the
to me
camera?
after the last debate.
You could look at us.
Okay.
Was the worst picture anyone ever took of me.
I mean, if it's something you want to talk directly to the community, I guess, you could look at the camera if you want like a
Break the
dramatic
fourth
effect.
wall a little bit.
I have an 18 and a 16.
I'm gonna look
What
at
you can
Claire.
do for your
That's my
clothes.
plan.
You can do for your clothes.
She's right in line.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, both at home and in our studio audience, and welcome to the HCAM and Hopkinton Independent 2017 Planning Board Debate. I'm HCAM News Director Tom Nappy, and I will be the moderator for tonight's debate. This evening, we will hear from 5 candidates in the race for Planning Board. Our panelists this evening include Michelle Murdoch and Jim Kleinkoff from the Hopkinton Independent, as well as myself, Tom Nappy. Our format for these debates is simple. We will alternate asking each candidate questions, and they will have up to 1 minute to respond. If you hear the bell, you have 10 seconds remaining. If a candidate has a follow-up response to another candidate's comment, they can state they would like to make an additional comment. I will cue them, and the candidate will have 30 seconds for the comment. A panelist may ask a follow-up question, and the candidate will have up to 1 minute to respond. Following the question and answers, each candidate will have up to 2 minutes each for a closing statement. The candidates for Planning Board featured on tonight's debate include Amy Ritterbusch, Muriel Kramer, Gary Trendle, and Ken Wisemantel, who are running for the 2 available 5-year term spots, and Irfan Nasrullah, who is running for the open 1-year term spot. The other candidate for the 1-year spot, Al Rogers, was invited but unfortunately had a prior commitment and could not be with us tonight. So without further ado, we will start the debate with the first question. I'll ask the first question, and the first question is, what motivated you to run for the Planning Board, and why do you think you are qualified to fill this position? We'll start off with Mr. Trendle.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks to HCAM for having us tonight. For me, my desire to run really came down to a couple of things. First and foremost, as I've gotten more involved with some of the planning board activities, I felt that there was an opportunity to help help the planning board become better planners, and really help put forth and help execute the master plan that the board has put together. Secondly, I'm a big cyclist, and I think that something that I'm very passionate about, and I have a desire to improve bicycle accessibility and bicycle safety in town. And third, candidly, I think that as I've learned, our town is run by volunteers, and this is something that I've been passionate about for most of my life, since I was in high school, and I think that it's an exciting opportunity to engage, set an example for my family, and hopefully help give back to the community that's been my home for a long time and will be for a long time to come.
Excellent. Amy.
Hi, thank you for the question. So when I looked at what the offices were up for election this year, I saw that there were 4 seats on the planning board, and I'd heard several of the people on the planning board were not going to run again, so I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to run. And I've been following these issues for many years on EHOP, research, especially traffic safety in in recent years, and water and drought issues. And let's see, I do a lot of work with EHOP, getting ready for a town meeting and researching all the zoning issues and learning more. And I've been following it for so many years, I thought this was a good chance for me to run myself. I've also been on the design review board for the last year, and we get to see a lot of the plans that the planning board later sees. So I'm very experienced in looking at the same issues. Thanks.
Terrific. Ken?
Okay, I'd like to start with the second part of the question first. Why am I qualified? I've been on the planning board for 10 years. The last 6 years I've chaired the planning board. I was also on the zoning advisory committee and chaired that for many years. Before that, I was elected as water and sewer commissioner and DPW commissioner, so I've been involved with the infrastructure of the town for pretty close to 25 years. What motivated me to run for the planning board? Well, the first time I ran was 10 years ago, and I was motivated on how we could manage our growth. There was 2 projects that were coming on at that particular time. One was Legacy Farms, and the other was the Terry land off of Lumber Street. When I ran the second time, I wanted to continue the work that I had been doing in my first 5 years. Those 2 projects had still not completely finished, and there's still work to do. My motivation this time is kind of similar motivation. Legacy Farms is still about halfway done and has a lot of finished work to do, and also the Lumber Street project is still progressing.
Terrific. Muriel?
Yeah, hi, thank you for the question. I'm Muriel Kramer. I first got my interest actually in town government and the planning board specifically when I started writing for the Hopkinton Independent, as it happens, and covered the planning board as part of that beat. One of my first civic engagements as a volunteer was Voices for Vision, a big planning effort. And then also I chaired the master plan update of 10 years ago, which was a wonderful effort. I've always been very interested in planning. It sort of suits my my skill set the best. I like to see things from a big picture. I like to look forward. I love this town. My husband and I have been here for 25 years. I'm very dedicated to giving back to this town. And I really think that planning has been a spot that's been I've been looking at for a long time. I haven't actually been able to do it before now because I've been pursuing a master's at Boston College in social work. And I now am done happily and look forward to serving on the planning board. I have also served as selectman and been involved in the intervening 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the question. So what motivated me is I've been a resident of Hopkinton. We moved here in 1981, and I've lived here pretty much ever since. Gone off to get educated, and came back, kept coming back. You know, I've always enjoyed the town. Similar to Gary, I'm an avid cyclist, and I've been riding the trails and riding the roads around here for the past 30, 40 years. There comes a point where one kind of stops and thinks, okay, I've taken from this community for so long, and maybe it's time for me to give back. Why am I qualified? Well, I mean, that was part of the motivation. It's time for me to give back, and well, I'm an attorney. I'm an environmental attorney. I also practice real estate, and I thought, well, I think I'm eminently qualified in that I'm appearing before planning boards. I know the law, and thought it would be a perfect opportunity for me to give back to my community, given my qualifications.
Terrific. All right, Michelle has the second question. Amy will answer first.
Okay, this is sort of related to how the planning board works, and recently there have been some comments out there that the planning board is reactive versus proactive. First of all, do you agree with this statement? And secondly, how does that work in planning?
Okay. So in a lot of aspects, the planning board does react to the plans that are submitted by the developers. They also have an important role in guiding the master plan, and there are many action items in the new master plan that the planning board will need to follow up on and make sure that those get implemented. So that's a proactive rather than a reactive thing. They also work with the zoning advisory committee, who can suggest new bylaws, which would be a proactive thing they could do to improve our zoning bylaws. Let's see, and they appoint the members of the design review board, so that is also, I think, a little bit proactive to get better designed
Ken,
items.
same question.
A lot of what the planning board does is reactive, because we have to approve what is, or disapprove what is submitted for us. Planning board does site plan review, which enforces the community standards on every commercial business that comes before us, or any commercial site. Some of the proactive things we do, one is the master plan, which we've just finished updating. Another proactive item that I've been very much involved in is the sidewalk planning. And we've really kind of initiated that over the last 10 years. The planning board also can be assigned by the Board of Selectmen for various planning activities. That's in our charter. And then, of course, the Zoning Advisory Committee, where we come up with 10 small pieces of zoning articles at every town meeting to keep our zoning bylaws current.
Terrific. Uriel?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the planning board has to react, or I guess I rather think about it as respond to developers as they come in. That's a central role of the planning board. I think that when I envision the work there, I really want to make sure that sort of the third leg of the stool is fully represented, and that would be the residents and residents' concerns. And I think that hasn't been necessarily fully entertained in the past. And I want to make sure that every single resident who attends and invests their time really feels like they have a seat at the table. I want to be part of a planning board member that that speaks from a foundation of the master plan. One of the things with the master plan, I think that the planning board did a great job with this latest edition. One of the things that I'd like to see the planning board do in a proactive way potentially is create some SMART goals, time-measured goals within that, so that each year we have some working sessions and some benchmarks, and we measure how we're doing on the goals in the master plan, in addition to the work of receiving developers' plans.
Okay, very fun.
Well, obviously, the planning board must react to plans that are brought before it from developers and homeowners, whomever is coming before. So there's no getting around it. The planning board must react. I think that the planning board also has the proactive vision in the master plan, as has been stated. I think the planning board has already done a wonderful job in managing the growth of the town. There is more that can be done in a proactive manner. As we're approving various subdivisions, we can look at our master plan and revise as we go to think how is the town growing, and what do we foresee? What are the needs that we can foresee in the future?
All right, Gary?
So I think as others have alluded, there's some great examples of how the planning board has been proactive. But I think there's also some ways that they could certainly be better. We've talked a lot about the master plan, and I think that's a great document. I think it sets forth a vision that all of us, that describes a town that we all like to live in. I think sometimes where things fall short is on the execution side. So just as an example, you look at even the master plan from 10 years ago, as it looked at East Hopkinton, there's some vulnerabilities there on some big plots of land that I don't think have yet been addressed sufficiently. And then the second example, I think that there's a great opportunity to leverage the professional planners that we have with Jennifer Burke and even Elaine as she's moved into her new role. But I think that we can probably do a better job of utilizing their skill sets as we look to really embrace that master plan and find ways to incorporate into everything we do.
Okay, Michelle, I believe you have a follow-up?
I do have a follow-up, just sort of to go into this a little. Do you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, a little rebuttal on that one, please. I kind of heard that the residents aren't heard at the planning board meetings, and that I don't think is simply true. We make a point of making sure we listen to everyone at the meetings. we've instituted an outline for all of our site plan reviews where we keep the discussion focused, and before we finish a topic, we discuss it fully and come up with consensus. The execution plan has also been implemented in the master plan for the first time. The planning board worked with all the other various towns and committees and basically put into place where the individual committees set their own goals and schedule for the execution plan. So that's in there for the first time, and the planning board took a goal to basically follow that up at the end of every calendar year.
Okay, Michelle?
I would like to follow up. if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you. So I think that there's a difference between being heard and being listened to. I just want to make that point. And I think that residents need a larger voice in the actual process of the planning board, their comments that they make. And I completely appreciate a respectful process. I completely appreciate a predictable process, and I think the planning board is to be congratulated for that. I think we can take it one step further and make sure that people's concerns are fully integrated into the decisions of the planning board.
Okay.
I have a comment as well, if that's all right.
Sure.
I was just going to say, the most of the time when we see residents come to the planning board, it's usually because there's an issue in their neighborhood or their area, and then the planning board, does listen to all the residents' concerns. But I think one way they could do better is when they're working on the master plan or the hearing on the zoning bylaws. I think that very few residents attend those events, and the planning board needs to be out there getting more input in. Maybe they need to, instead of being at their meeting, maybe they need to go out and have a few public forums in other places to engage the residents a little more in these more long-term goals.
Okay.
Am
Michelle?
I good?
You're good.
I'm good, I'm on, okay. I'm holding my question. All right, it kind of relates to what we've been talking about. When you hear a lot say when there's land that's available and it's gonna be developed, the chatter goes throughout town, I want this, I want that. People want to be able to choose the business that comes. How do you balance what the residents want with the rights of the property owner? And does the planning board really have a role in trying to attract a specific type of business? Yes or no?
All right. We'll start off with Gary.
Okay. So I didn't realize that. I thought we were going to continue down in order. But that's okay.
Should we start with Amy?
No? Did we go all the way through?
We did.
Okay.
We did, okay.
This is a follow-up, so.
Okay. So with regards to balancing the voice of the residents and what people want versus the developers, I'm a big believer in compromise. And at the end of the day, development is always tough. It's tough on people that can be impacted by it. And I think it's important that people realize that property owners do have rights. If I wanted to build a shed in the middle of my backyard and it complied with the zoning and the bylaws and the building codes and whatnot, I'm entitled to do that. If I were to buy a piece of land that I was going to build a house on, and it conforms, then I should be able to do that. But at the same point, I think it's really important that everybody works together. And I think just as an example, I live on Chamberlain Street. There's a big development being proposed there right now that we might get a question about. But I think that we're doing a really good job of working as neighbors with the developer. And I'm confident that we'll be able to find a compromise that will meet all of our needs. And then there was a yes or no question. Can you just repeat that, Michelle?
That was pretty much it, right?
Yeah, just keep going, we
Okay.
can.
So, Amy?
Yeah, so the planning board does not get to, choose the exact business that goes in any exact location, as much as I think everybody would like to choose what business goes into every location. But they can at least guide a little bit. They can propose new zoning bylaws that might attract the right types of businesses that the residents are saying they would like. But we can't pick if it's going to be a sandwich shop versus a pizza shop. Like that's the business owner that wants to come in can choose that if it's zoned for a restaurant. Let's see, the other rights of the residents. Oh, I thought I had one more point, but no, I can't think of it. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go.
All right. Ken?
Choosing a business, I always get somebody that comes up and says, gee, I'd really like to have a bookstore downtown. And I say, please, open one up. Some vacant spots, or geez, maybe we need another dry cleaner in town or another pizza place. You know, it's, a process is that individuals and property owners and people that might rent the property from them decide what they're going to invest in and what they're going to try to make work. Where the planning board can make some influence on that is where their zoning bylaws say. You know, there's some things that are not allowed in other different districts, and we're trying to encourage certain types of business to be in one area. You know, for example, we're not zoned for big box stores in Hopkinton, never have been, and therefore we don't have any big box stores. We limit, you know, where medical marijuana stores are allowed in town. And we did that through the town meeting process. So basically, we've kind of put together an expectation of where we want the development.
Okay, here.
Yeah, so yes, we can't decide for people what kind of businesses they bring here in the specific, except in the broad strokes. As others have said, in your zoning, for example, as Ken was just saying, big box stores and things like that, we've been pretty predictable in not wanting those. And we would have to make zoning changes in order to bring those in. I think we all have an idea of what the kind of businesses that people would like to see. And I think the planning board's role in that is to be responsive, to predictable in their process for all businesses. And then when businesses come in that may be a little bit intrusive with property owners, again, I'm gonna say this more than once, respond to the residents' concerns and try to work with the developers to find that magic compromise that takes into account the residents' concerns as well as the business owners' rights. One of the things that I would like to see us do is look at hours. As we have more development closer to residential neighborhoods, I'd like to look at hours in the zoning for hours of operation.
Okay, Irfan?
So I kind of view this as, you know, individual rights versus community rights. And everyone has an opportunity to participate in where businesses are going to go within the town through the whole zoning process and through town meeting and being able to participate in the electoral process. Obviously, the planning board has its role in the master plan and zoning and recommendations and that, so on and so forth. Individual rights, though, the individual property rights are not absolute, and it's important to note for any developer, any person who wants to open a business, to realize that we're all still going to be neighbors. Your business is not going to be successful if you're not wanted here. So that's where community involvement really comes into play, and I think it makes a lot of sense for any business owner to talk to people and say, hey, do we need another pizza place? Do we need a marijuana dispensary? Whatever it may be, it's worth speaking to the community.
All right.
Tom, can I follow up?
Sure.
I just want to make one more point, building off of some of what Irfan had said. But I think in so many ways the planning board is an advocate for the town. And that can come across in several fronts, can certainly come across as representing abutters and neighbors. But I think they're also really want to be responsible for the greater interests of the town. And I think that's where that contrast plays off between the individual developers and the planning board, is that, you know, at the end of the day, they need to be looking at what is best for Hopkinton first.
Okay.
Just a
Amy?
brief follow-up, I did remember what I was going to say. I think there's a good opportunity for the planning board to work with the Chamber of Commerce about how to attract the sorts of businesses that residents are demanding and would like. We don't have an economic development officer in town, but you know, the Chamber of Commerce would probably be helpful to advise, be able to advise a little bit on that.
Okay. All right, I think we're ready for the next question. Jim, you have the next question. Ken Wisemantel will answer first.
All right, thank you. My question is based on my experience. I've been covering the planning board for a year now on a regular basis. I started just after the election, and one of the first things that I covered was the resubmission by Legacy Farms to what was, there'd been a sea change in the board after the election, so Legacy Farm chose to refile. And I also, when I worked for Metro West Daily News, when I was transferred to the South Bureau in 2001, I assigned coverage of Hopkinton town government from then until 2009. So I came in at the time of the Porchero case, in which a developer sued the town for a tremendous amount of money. It was a devastating financial loss for the town and a loss of reputation, or damage to the town's reputation. I went through the bankruptcy of Western Nurseries, the beginning of the development of Lakes Farm South, before I retired from the news. I'm glad to be back. I've always enjoyed Hopkinton town politics, believe it or not. The question that I have is, in my opinion, one of the biggest challenges Hopkinton faces right now is the creeping and disproportional footprint of the utility Eversource in town. And at this particular time, we're looking at a proposal for a gas gate station on the east side of town. We're looking at a proposal that I think the selectmen heard a little bit of last night, of $150 million 3-acre liquefier installation up on Wilson Street, across, I believe it's pretty much across from where Serenity House currently is, which has been sold to Eversource and will be dismantled. In addition to that, there is another proposal for a solar farm that'll run along Raftery Road, or Rafferty Road, where the dog kennel is, or was, right up pretty much to the corner. We're talking about possibly the defoliation or through cutting of maybe 20 acres of trees to put in solar panels. So that is problematic in two ways, since it's in the exclusion zone. Possibility of sparks from solar panels and the destruction of the trees, which act as a natural buffer for gases. So, given all of that, what recourse does the town have in fighting this? Where the utility usually, and I'm gonna say almost rubber stamps Eversource's plans, and has done so in the past. And we'll start with Ken.
Okay, let me take them, it's 3 separate projects. It was a fourth with a big transformer that they shoehorned in on South Street. Let's start with the Gasgate station. The proposed location near Eltonwood School is just the absolute wrong spot. Quite frankly, the town needs to work with them to try to find a better location for that infrastructure improvement. Jim, you're absolutely right. Most of the time, these are not approved locally, but they're approved by the Department of Public Utilities, and the town has a miserable track record of winning on that. That does not say that we shouldn't fight the fight on infrastructure or intervenor status on all of these projects. The LNG liquefier is a huge project, $150 million worth, very large. It's part of a piece of infrastructure in town that has some unique concerns for the safety of the townspeople. We also ought to be in intervenor status on that. I spent 17 years of my life in the cryogenics industry. I know an awful lot about that particular project. The solar farm, which you stated with the trees being a very good part of the buffer, that would be something the planning board would consider if we allowed it.
All right, Muriel?
I think there should be an arrangement with the rules. If it's a 20-minute question, you get a 20-minute answer.
I did allow a little extra time.
All right. Great question, and I think that this is an opportunity for the entire town to come together. the gas gate is not just a problem for Elmwood School, and it's not just a problem for those residents. Frankly, it's a problem for every single one of us in Hopkinton. The solar farm, I'm a big fan of solar farms. I'm a big fan of trees. I'm a big fan of those trees up there being a protective feature. I hate to think of trees being taken down, and I've seen it time and time again, to put up solar panels when there are areas where we can put solar panels. So I guess I'm riding around to, there needs to be a collaboration of town leaders on all the boards and committees. The town leaders, Ken mentioned the intervenor status. We need to consult the town attorney and see what we can do about the intervenor status. We need to work vigorously with our legislators to have representation at the state so that our interests are heard. And then I think we need to get really serious about the fact that we all need and use these utilities. And we need to be collaborative with the companies and find alternatives. You know, the gas gate on Elm Street is just nuts, and they need to find a different spot. The solar panels ought to be able to go someplace where they are less disruptive. I think that there are ways to make some of these projects work that are much more palatable for everybody in the town and the utility companies.
All right, Irfan?
So I kind of view this as an environmental justice issue, which is where, you know, those with the least representation or the quietest voice have an opportunity to really object. And unfortunately, a lot of times, you know, needed infrastructure would be placed in the wrong place simply because those people aren't voicing their opinions. Here, you know, we have I think the gas station is the best example. That we're putting it by a school in Elmwood Street. Come on, this doesn't make any sense. So I think the planning board should have a say, and in working with the utilities. When it comes to solar, I'm a huge fan of solar power. I think it's something that we need to do as a community, as a country, as a town, you name it. But again, it's a question of putting it in the right place. And I think we have ways of dealing with it through looking at the master plan. And as both Ken and Muriel have said, the interpleader status and working with our legislators, we need to have a voice, and we need to have a louder voice.
Okay, Gary?
Some great comments from my counterparts here. I think this is one question that we're all largely going to agree on, and that there are some very, very real issues with what's being proposed. To Muriel's point, I think this is an opportunity for us to rally as a community, and I have to applaud the neighborhoods over on Elm Street that have really raised this issue and have done a great job of making people aware and bringing some publicity to it. I think the selectmen have done a great job, and just being at the meeting 2 weeks ago, it was very clear that the town is aligned around protecting its citizens, and I think that is fantastic. And that being said, there are probably certainly some more things that we can do. The intervener status is important. I think getting proper legal representation is important. I also think there's an opportunity to leverage the press. And you look at the gas gate situation, who is going to agree that putting this next to a school is a good idea? And I think that there is an opportunity, utilities, I think that at some point they do respond to the public will. It just takes a big number of people to do that, and I think that the press could provide an opportunity to do just that.
Okay, Amy?
Hi. Well, I don't want to repeat too much of what everyone else has said. I think we're generally in agreement on these issues, that the gas gate does not belong near the Appletree Hill condos or the Elmwood School, and that but our hands are tied a little bit, and that they're going to try to get a permit with the DPU. But we need to be in close contact all the time with our legislators, Carolyn Dykema and Karen Spilka. And I'm pleased that selectmen are supporting us, and they're trying to get intervenor status, I believe. I'm a big fan of solar normally. I participated in the Solarize Hopkinton program a few years ago, and we have solar panels on our roof. But I don't like the idea of cutting down trees in order to make room for solar, especially if it might cause sparks that could endanger the LNG plant. So, I really hope that we could find a better place, because there are places that don't have trees already that would be a better place for solar, I think.
Okay.
That's good.
Ken?
One really quick one, follow-up on this. Once they file with the DPU within about 45 days will have a public hearing in Hopkinton. It's very important that everyone comes out to that public hearing. On the transformer station on South Street, I was the only representative as a citizen that actually went to the hearing and testified. Why I'm a little discouraged on the intervenor status is basically the town did a great job of legally filing, and it's a very legalistic motion when you're into that status. Lawyers make a lot of money off of it. Eversource has got a lot of lawyers on their staff. And basically, we wanted them to limit their zoning to just what they needed. So if the front setback was 30 feet, we said, we'll give you 30 feet, but you can't get within 10 feet of the front. And the same with the height and 4 or 5 other things they did. DPU just exempted them entirely from zoning, so nobody in the town had any say at all over what the project ended up looking like. And quite frankly, it is incredibly ugly, particularly if you look at from the Dell Property Management Office.
All right. I think
Follow, if I may,
Sure.
please. Based on some of the, basically, I don't think we've really addressed the how. We've said, and I heard that, you know, everybody needs to come together. And going through state reps is a start, and state senators, but we're dealing with an executive branch, not a legislative branch. And the last time I talked to Carolyn Dykema, she said, you know, that both she and Senator Spilka would be certainly be responsive to any concerns that the town has. And they have written letters on the town's behalf, and have had a response from Eversource saying, well, we look forward to working with you on this project. But the bottom line is, at a time when the town can barely muster a quorum at town meeting to get people interested, how are we going to, is the town going to mobilize enough people to make a difference with an executive branch of government that seems to be kind of overriding everybody's views? And we're not just talking about abutters, because if there were an accident up at the LNG tank, everybody's an abutter.
Anyone want to volunteer to start?
I'll start it off.
Sure.
I had conversations with the school superintendent when this Cascade first was announced for Hopkinton. And basically I said what she could do to help us in the process is to send out a letter advertising that hearing with every parent going to Center School and Elmwood School, etc. And that would certainly mobilize the support. We could maybe hold a meeting in a big place. And if there was more than just one person there, I mean, I'm talking hundreds of people, maybe we'll get some attention on that issue. That's the best thing you can do. I do not believe the legislators have been, on other ones, have been very successful in getting anything done. This is a very kind of independent judicial board that one of their main goals is to keep our prices for gas or electricity as low as possible, and they find to do that by doing the less amount of mitigation as possible.
I'll just ask, does anyone else have a response to this?
Yeah,
Mary?
I'll take a shot at it.
Sure.
I appreciate the question because I guess we're going to have to find out how, aren't we? I think I had a little facetious thing. You'll see us all chained to tanks and doing civil disobedience out there, but maybe not. I do think that it's a great question, and we do need to find out the best way to strategize and the best way to present a united front. And then we simply need to do some community organizing, and that's a lot of ways. That's utilizing, as Ken said, the school listserv and the eHop and the Hopkinton Independent and Hop News and the Metro West Daily News, as Gary said, leveraging the press. But I think the first steps probably are to find out what does work for communities when they find themselves in this position and organize around a strategy that is proven, perhaps innovative, but some backbone of a strategy that people have used that is workable. And then, ask the community for help and leverage the talent in the community. We have a very, very talented, very motivated community, and I can see a successful effort if we find out what the steps are that we really need to take.
So, there are due process requirements for any executive agency. Any agency that wants to take an action has to give its community its due process. So, as you mentioned, as Ken had mentioned, there are hearings, and these are the opportunities for us all to participate and hopefully influence just ultimate decision. That said, then the ultimate question becomes, how do we mobilize? And while we have, the traditional media, leveraging the news, leveraging our friends in legislature, we're also into a whole new era of social media, which seems like a very, very effective method of, we saw a president get elected using social media. So it seems like a very effective method of communication. I guess the question ultimately would be, who on the planning board is going to be tweeting and who's going to be following the Hopkinton Planning Board. But those are questions that, we could, if we want to mobilize our community, those are questions that we would need to ask and start organizing as to how can we effectively reach out to our community.
So within this room, I mean, aside from the planning board, within this room, we have the president of EHOP, we have the Hopkinton Independent, we have HCAM. Within our town, we have someone that runs Hop News. We have someone that has some form of relationship with Governor Baker. And I think at the end of the day, there is a lot at our disposal to raise awareness. I mean, you can easily see the story on the local news channel that speaks exactly to like Eversource, proposing this gas gate near a school. I mean, that kind of publicity puts immense pressure on them. And when you combine that with the executive branch in Massachusetts, you combine it with raising awareness through the channels we have within our community, I think there's a great opportunity. And just one more point that I should make too is that I think in so many ways for Eversource, it comes down to the best alternative that they have. And I don't know how to do this, but if we can find out what their other options are, that puts us in a better negotiating position, because at the end of the day, they're going to find something. And if we can find out what their other options are, then hopefully we can steer them towards those other options.
All right, Amy.
I was just going to add that, sometimes we have to get out of Hopkinton. I appreciate Jim's question. Like, we may need to actually go to the State House, and we may need to call Governor Baker and do things in person, or calls are often much more effective than tweets or emails. As much as it's easier to tweet and email, we do have to sometimes go in person. I was really involved in the, as many of us were, I think, in the No Milford Casino issue a few years back. And I did have to go to meetings in Milford and Holliston and meet with a lot of towns. It was more of a regional issue that a lot of people were upset with. And I think when the election is over, the no Elmwood Gasgate signs will become much more prominent in town when all the other signs are gone. And we do need to mobilize our residents and maybe get out of our comfort zones and make phone calls and go in person.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question. Muriel Kramer will have the first response. And I have the question. The planning board must work as a team to help make decisions and decide what is best for the town. How well do you work with others, and can you give examples? And we'll start off with Muriel Kramer.
Boy, I have great experience in town government, working in tough situations. I'm very dedicated to working on a team. I'm very dedicated to the collaborative process. I understand that not everybody's needs can be satisfied, but everybody's needs must be considered. I think that as leaders in the town, our young people certainly, but all of our residents look to us, and I think that it's incumbent upon all of us to work together. That being said, I don't think that it's going to be that hard. There's some really great people working in town government, and I look forward to working with anybody and whatever combination of people that are elected. If I'm lucky enough to be one of those people, I'm very confident that I can work collegially with anybody in town. I do happen to be a newly graduated social worker, so it's incumbent upon me to be social worky, and to be inviting, responsive, and responsible in my interactions. So, thank you.
Okay, Irfan?
So what I find fortunate about the planning board is we all have the same interest in mind. We all want to do what's best for our town. We all may differ in what is best for the town, but I think if we all take a step back and think, okay, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? It's all what's in the best interest. And from that perspective, party affiliation doesn't really matter. It's all about how can we assist our community. So from that perspective, if we're all sitting at the same table, we're kind of forced to work together. I take that perspective, and I like to listen to other views and other opinions. I think that my opinion is, while valuable, is not the only one that matters. And it's worth hearing others, and very frequently that my opinion will evolve just by hearing others. And other people's opinions will evolve by hearing mine. So I think it's a collaborative process, and I think, as I said, as I started, the fortunate thing is we all have the same interest in mind. How do we get there? May be different, but we can work together.
All right, Aaron?
So some great points from both Muriel and Irfan. For my job, what I do full time is I work for a large corporation in medical devices. We call it enterprise marketing strategy. My role is to influence a whole bunch of people that don't work for me. And that's what I do every day, is work with a group of people that have different interests, that have different goals, and help bring people to a common pathway forward. I think I've exhibited that in my engagement in the town thus far, in the Upper Charles Trails Committee, as age group coordinator for Hopkinton Youth Soccer, and all my coaching responsibilities as well. And to me, the things that are really important that folks have already alluded to, but being open-minded, I think it's really important. If you can put yourself in the shoes of the person that you're working with, it's going to put you in a better negotiating position, whether you agree with them or not. Eversource, if you can see it from their perspective, that's going to put you in a better negotiating position to work better with them. And then lastly, transparency. I think that's of utmost importance. Between open-mindedness, understanding people's perspective, and transparency, I think those go a long ways in working together.
Okay, Amy.
So I've had a lot of experience in working on teams, both in volunteer capacity with the PTA, EHOP, and Scouts. And I don't think I'll have any problem working with others. I've been in front of the planning board a few times for design review board, and it seems like a good group. And I like that it's a smaller room atmosphere, and it's easy. They let other people speak, unlike the selectmen and school committee. It's in such a big room, and you just get to speak in the mic, and they don't usually respond. But at the planning board, it's much more collegial. When I've worked in a group, everyone brings a different thing to the table, and I tend to bring communication, organization, electronic media, sort of skills to the table, and I think that would be an asset to the planning board. I recently implemented a project at work for the Wellesley Public Schools to implement text messaging to parents throughout the district, and that was a big project with many components, where I had to get the principals on board and secretaries who maybe have been doing things one way for 30 years and not understanding why parents might want to get text messages. But I worked with everyone, got the superintendent on board, and upgraded our system so that we could implement this text messaging this year.
Ken?
I think the planning board works as a team pretty well today. Most of our votes are unanimous. There is discussion around different points, and we usually try to, I'll say, beat the point to death, and if we can get a consensus on where it is. One of the examples I'd like to give you as to why I think I work well as a team. I've been elected for the last 6 years as chairman of the planning board. If, quite frankly, my other fellow members didn't think I was doing a good job leading them as a team, they wouldn't keep re-electing me. The other example I'd like to use is the Zoning Advisory Committee. The planning board appoints the Zoning Advisory Committee, and for the last few years, we've appointed everyone that wanted to go for it. Got a little unmanageable a couple years ago when we had 15 people on it, but that diversity was so great. If you get all the different factions on that committee, and it was fun chairing that committee because there were so many points of view on it, some from the hard right, some from the hard left, and if you come up with a product that meets it through that process, then you have a very high probability of getting the article through town meeting floor, and that's been our experience.
All right, terrific. I think we are ready for the next question. Jim, you have the next question.
I do. And I'll try to keep this one under 20 minutes, but it is a little, it is a little complicated.
Oh, boy, taking notes.
Over 50 households in the area, Chamberlain and Wayland subdivision, have expressed opposition to the proposed development plan in various forums, including the planning board public hearings and local news outlets. At one point, one of the co-chairs of the neighborhood association claimed to have a petition with 500 names on it. And the last, I think there have only been 2 public hearings so far on this proposal, and both have been a real up close and personal lesson in where the concerns of the residents meet the rights of the developers. And it's, involves a possibility of a through road between 2 cul-de-sacs. So obviously there's some traffic concerns. And it's a complicated issue. I'm going to follow with a further complication. Let me just ask you right now, how do you think it should be handled with what you know?
And we'll start off with Irfan.
Well, I think the voice of the community is invaluable in such a situation. You think about it, any of these homeowners, they bought these houses with a certain expectation that they went and bought a house on a cul-de-sac on both ends of this neighborhood, proposed neighborhood. So they had a certain expectation going in, and then to have the rug pulled out from under them, it certainly feels unfair. So I believe the question is how do we
How would you handle it?
How do we handle it? I think that it's very important to listen to what the people are saying. As a town, we have our master plan, we have our zoning, and we have to react to the plans that are put before us. But that doesn't mean that we have to close our eyes to what the community is also telling us. I think it's I'll leave it at that.
Gary?
So I'll try to keep this to a minute. I live on Chamberlain Street. I've lived on Chamberlain Street for 10 years. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. One of the reasons we moved to Chamberlain Street is because of the peaceful nature of it, the community that we have with our neighbors, and part of that comes with being a dead-end street. At the same time, as neighbors, we recognize that developers have rights. And I think as far as how to move things forward, I think, again, this is another example where we as a combined neighborhood have done things right. We've organized, we've had meetings, we talk about options. I think most importantly, we're working towards compromises. None of us want to see that land developed at all. But the reality of it is that that's not our decision to make, and I think that we as a group recognize that, and I think that we are effectively working towards that compromise. I think the planning board has done a great job of acknowledging our concerns, of listening to us, of hearing our voice, and I'm hopeful that as the process continues to move forward, that we will end up at a place that works not just for the developer, but for all of us as neighbors and residents as well.
All right, Amy.
So I'm going to echo what Gary and Irfan have said too, that the planning board really needs to listen to the neighbors, find out their concerns, and if there are specific concerns that could be mitigated by adjusting the development. They're going to have to work closely with the Conservation Commission because there are several wetland crossings. The most recent plan only had 2 versus the previous plan had 5. But so residents' concerns need to be listened to. the process needs to be explained to residents in some cases, which I think has happened now, but when someone first finds out there's a project in their backyard, they don't necessarily understand the process and what effect they can have. Let's see. So I think that's what I've got.
Sure. Ken?
This subdivision is in process. We'll obviously follow all the bylaws and procedures of the planning board. In general, the planning board prefers an open space proposal because, as opposed to a conventional plan, we require by their bylaw that everyone of 10 acres or more submit a open space proposal first, and only if that is denied by the planning board can a conventional plan be submitted. One of our planning board members mentioned at the first hearing, be careful what you wish for. I think the open space proposal with a small emergency access with gated, that's gated off, that basically extends the cul-de-sacs, is something that is within our procedures and bylaws and meets most of the compromises that be needed. That also protects the trails and the historic structures. The conventional plan would subdivide every inch of the property, resulting in bigger lots, and the developer would probably make a lot more money, but we'd lose the trails and everything else. And there's almost no stopping the conventional plan based on the traffic input that we got from our engineers.
All right. Yariat?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, everybody, for coughing over here. First of all, so I don't know how it's going to go either. Definitely the open space plan is a more desirable way to go. I have a lot of questions. I want to make sure that there's some predictability of process, remembering that it's not just Chamberlain friends and Whalen Road friends that are our neighbors, but Paul Mastriani, the developer, is a neighbor as well, and a valued businessman in town. So we do want to accommodate everybody's concerns. As I've been at the meetings, I'm developing my questions a little bit real time. And one of the things that I'm interested in finding out more about is, the question included where the developer's rights and the residents' rights stop and start. To develop that particular parcel of land requires a great deal of disruption on particularly Chamberlain, certainly disruption to Whalen too, more than a street cut. But Chamberlain is actually a little more than, it's not even a driveway width at the end, with lots of wetlands concerns on the road itself. So I'm looking forward to learning more about what our role is as a planning board in accommodating those concerns as well as we consider the plan.
Okay. I think.
I'm going to follow.
All right.
All righty. Some more information, and as you consider this, remember the earlier reference to a devastating lawsuit by a developer. The planning board continued the public hearing, I believe, to June 12th, which seems like a long way off, but the problem is that the planning board, in the meantime, is going to change, which is why you're here. And what happened in this situation with Legacy Farms is they withdrew and refiled, and it's somewhat assumed that the developer will do that. He may not necessarily, though. He may take his chances because all the board needs is 6 members continuous to have heard, all the testimony during all the hearings, which gives him an opportunity to go for a conventional plan, which means bigger lots, no open space. He makes more money, most likely. So, your response to that possibility?
His options are the same no matter what the changes are on the planning board. He has the option, if he is turned down by the planning board in whatever configuration it is, he can do his conventional plan. That doesn't change whether it is There are still 6 members on there from previously or not. And it's entirely his choice to decide. If there are 6 remaining members on the planning board after the election that have heard all the hearings, it's gonna be the developer's choice whether to continue or not continue. It's his call. And, you know, I don't have any issue with that. It should be his call. Very often, developers will elect, as Legacy Farms, as Roy McDowell did for Legacy Farms, will elect to refile so that they have a more complete board. I will say that this level of turnover is unusual. Usually there's only 2 seats that are turning over. So this is a tough situation, and I'm sympathetic to that. But I think that it was also known, anybody out there was able to predict that there was a possibility or there was a likelihood that there would be a big turnover. So it just is what it is, and it's up to the developer to do what he'd like.
All right, did anyone else have anything to add?
I was just gonna.
Irfan? We'll just go in
Just
order here.
to echo some of what Muriel said, is that, you know, ultimately this is gonna come down to a question of timing. When is a project gonna come through there? The developer has his rights, and, you know, it's not that he can do whatever he wants, but he can do something there. So, is it gonna happen, you know, today, or is it gonna happen tomorrow, is ultimately what his choice is going to be. If we're looking at the open space versus the conventional thing piece, we also need to keep in mind that we're talking about public open space versus private open space, right? So facts on the ground, how different would they be if we were to look at the conventional system, conventional plan, it is windy and would slow traffic down. So there are some positives in looking at that. And there would be private, huge lots, but those aren't getting developed with other houses.
All right, Gary?
Yeah, just again, to echo some of the comments that have already been made. I mean, at the end of the day, the process is still the same. You know, he has to submit the open space proposal. If the open space proposal is denied, then he can go via the conventional plan. I think the tricky part here is that it definitely shifts the leverage that he has. You know, knowing that the conventional plan could potentially be more profitable for him. And certainly it changes the position, in particular for the neighbors and the abutters and whatnot, as they're probably going to become bigger advocates for the open space plan than they are now. But that's the reality of it. That problem exists regardless of timing here. The only real difference is that, you know, depending on what the makeup of the board is, he may have to start over or he may continue, but he still needs 6 votes, and that's true regardless of timing. So I actually, you know, after the planning board meeting on Monday night, I was a little concerned, but as I've thought about it further, I don't think it really changes a whole lot.
All right, Amy?
I was just going to add that I think a lot still weighs on the Conservation Commission, because I don't believe the developer has submitted his new revised plan officially to the Conservation Commission, and they may or may not allow the 20-foot wetland whether it's going to be a 20-foot or 12-foot wetland crossing in the middle on the biggest wetlands. So I think we have to wait for that outcome too.
Okay. Ken, anything you want to add?
Yeah, the Conservation Commission is the big, real question there, because they can stop it. This is his second and his third wetland crossing when you look at the entire big parcel. So they have, it's at their discretion. It's a fairly big parcel. He's still probably going to be under the 5,000 square feet, so there's a higher probability that they could approve it, but I'm not going to ever bet on which way the Conservation Commission is going, one way or the other. I was impressed when I did the site walk on the trail system that's existing there and trying to maintain that trail system and how it can interconnect with the center trail and the trails around the Muse area. I think it's really important in that. I am a big advocate more of the open space, but I'm an advocate of the open space subdivision plans in all over town as opposed to just this one. But this one here, I was really impressed with the trail system that's existing on the ground, and I'd like to preserve it.
All right, terrific. We're going to move on to the next question. Michelle, you have the next question.
Okay, the next question relates to another big project in town, and are you familiar with and do you support the goals of the Downtown Corridor Project?
Gary, you could start.
Sure. Yes, I am familiar with it, and yes, I am a big advocate for it. This is something that we talked a lot about when I was on the Upper Charles Trails Committee, specifically as we're looking at ways to connect the current Center Trail to the Ashland Town Line. We think that the Downtown Corridor Project plays a big role in that. I also think that, downtown is we're fortunate to have a downtown, while at the same time, we have a lot of vacancies there. And, while there's nothing that the planning board can necessarily do about vacancies, there are things we can do to make that a more desirable place to have a business. Some things I like about it, I love the current bike path, and it's a 2-lane bike path on one side, which I think is fantastic. That provides a safety barrier, whether it be for people, adults on bicycles, kids, pedestrians, and whatnot. Moving the utilities underground, the straightening the intersection. I think these are all fantastic things that really improve the quality of our downtown. And lastly, I think there is some urgency here because there's a risk of losing some of that state money if we don't continue to move forward.
Okay, Amy.
Thanks. Yes, I am familiar with the project. It came before the Historic District Commission in the fall, and I went to a Chamber of Commerce meeting recently where they presented an updated plan. I'm generally very supportive of it. I know they are planning to underground the utilities, and I'm not sure if, how the voters will feel about that, but just because of the cost. I think everybody would like it aesthetically. But there's some benefit in being able to configure the sidewalks and the bike lanes better without the utilities in the way. Let's see. And I'm really looking forward to the increase in the pedestrian safety. It is so dangerous when the kids walk from school and they want to go to Bittersweet or to Yogurt Beach, and crossing the street is really dangerous. And as a driver, I appreciate the changes that we had to the downtown intersection already, but I'm looking forward to straightening the end of the intersection so it's even more safe. Let's see. On the Historic District Commission, we were really happy that they listened to our feedback they were originally talking about cutting into the common a little bit to widen Marathon Way, I believe, to get more parking in. But they took our suggestion to extend the common to the Doughboy statue to make that all a pedestrian way. So I hope that will go forward and make the common bigger, not smaller.
All right, Ken?
I support the project, the traffic efficiency, not that traffic is going to go at high miles an hour, but it'll go through a lot quicker because we won't be sitting in dead stops so much. A lot of the traffic work was started when the planning board was looking at Legacy Farms early on in the zoning, and a lot of the current plan has a lot of the elements that were in that original Legacy Farms study. I was chosen by the town manager to be the spokesman at the MPO. The MPO is the state agency that determines where the funding is. I did 2 of those as an advocate for the project and spoke on behalf of the town with representatives of Senator Spilko's office and Carolyn Dykman's office. The project is looking right now, we're still on the funding list for 2019. That would be spring of 2019 to start construction. 25% design review where citizens will have an opportunity to go before that is coming up very shortly. And my only concern is that we work on getting some off-street parking to improve the parking situation downtown.
All right, Muriel Kramer.
Yeah, thank you. So I am familiar with the project, and I would echo that I support the desirability of the bike lanes. I was not necessarily, I always liked the idea of bikeability, but I didn't really understand how bike lanes could work. Now that I've been working more in the city of Boston, and I see in very heavy trafficked areas the ways that bike lanes really do cut down on traffic, really do help efficiencies, and really do increase safety. I get it now, and I would love to see that happen, and the pedestrian safety as well. As a mother of 6, I guess safety is my first thing always. I also applaud the efficiencies of the making the traffic intersection more efficient. It has become much better. I don't necessarily often commute through it at commuting times, but I know that every time I go through that intersection, it's better than it was before the lights were sequenced. So I appreciate that a lot. I would want to make sure that we marry this project, which I know is well underway, with the traffic calming above it that we're talking about. I just want to make sure that we're all talking together on a project that is seamless. And I just wanted to also say about the undergrounding of the overhead wires, as Amy said, I am very concerned about the cost, although I do really respect the level of effort and time that's gone into this. I just think that that's an open question.
Okay, fun.
So the downside about being the fifth person to speak in the whole row is what else is there to say? I can echo what everyone else has said, but I mean, the way I look at this is the cornerstone to any community is a downtown area where people gather and meet and socialize and meet others. So I think this, you know, the downtown corridor revitalization is a wonderful idea, but we always have to weigh cost versus benefit. Of course, you know, sinking the utilities would be nice. It would look great. I question whether how necessary it really is, but as we want to revitalize the downtown area, I think that's the cornerstone to a unified community.
All right.
Very supportive.
Can I just
Oh, sure.
make one more comment with regards to underground utilities?
And no doubt it is expensive, and I know there's a lot of strong beliefs on both sides of it. But number one, as part of the changes to Legacy Farms, I believe 2 years ago, I think, you know, Legacy Farm did commit some money specifically towards putting those utilities underground. Doesn't pay for all of it, but there's an opportunity for free money for us. And I believe that through the state application, there is an opportunity to help fund that as well. So this is one of those things that yes, it costs money, but it's going to cost us a lot less money to do it now than it would if we wanted to do it in the future.
Okay. All right, I think we're ready to move on. The next question. I have the next question. And Amy Ritterbush will answer first. In your opinion, what is the single biggest challenge facing the town in the coming year?
Well, I think it's going to have to be growth and how we're going to handle that. The influx of residents, especially to the Hopkinton Muse, which was the 40B project. It's really huge if you haven't been back there to see it. And it does help us meet our affordable housing goal, which is great. But I think it's going to bring a lot more school children, a lot more traffic, and we have to make sure we're managing it. And that Lumber Street intersection with West Main is already prone to accidents and congestion. It's difficult to turn. So our challenge is managing the growth.
All right, Ken.
I think the biggest challenge facing us in the next year, at least from the planning board standpoint, is Legacy Farms. I mean, that's always been the elephant in the room for the last 10 years. They're at a crucial part where the north side is starting to be developed and the south side has to get all buttoned up. There are all sorts of things on the south side that still need to be done. Overlaying of roads, planting of a lot of trees, et cetera, that has not been done. And so we need to finish up the south side to the standards that were issued in their site plan reviews and subdivisions approvals. And then the north side, we're trying to kick off the construction so that it is done in accordance with everything that we've issued so far. And then there is some additional work over the next couple of years on Legacy Farms, like the commercial area that needs to be permitted.
Both great challenges. So I would like to looking near term at the coming year, as you asked. I agree with Amy and with Ken that making those projects work in town is a big challenge for the town going forward. I think that from a planning board perspective, I have a little bit, I'd like to spend some time in this next year really looking at the ways Hopkinton has changed, and largely because of the bigger growth pieces at the Muse and at Legacy Farms, and really take a new look at strategizing where the green spaces and the historic spaces are that need to be protected, where the and I'm going to say vulnerable, but where the opportunity properties are for development that might be considered for either construction or development. I guess I think the next year should be spent really considering where we are with all the growth that we have accommodated or are accommodating, and really think about what it is we want to see happen in the next 5, 10, and 20 years.
I don't want to diminish anything that anyone else has said. I think every opinion that we've heard is valid. We've heard the micro aspect and we've heard the macro. And I think I tend to fall on the macro side of things, where we really want to look at the growth of Hopkinton over the past 5, 10 years, and how are we going to manage it moving forward. I think the master plan is a good tool, but kind of, similar to what Muriel is saying, is taking a look at what properties are opportunity properties, and what do we want to see happen with it? How do we want to see the town grow? I think that's the biggest challenge for the planning board and for everyone in Hopkinton. Is we came to this small community, and I think we all kind of want to see it stay a small community, realizing that we can't force that.
So certainly a lot of challenges in the year to come, and I think all of these are worthy to talk about. To me, success is 20% strategy and 80% execution. And you look at our master plan, it's a great document. It's aspirational. It describes some place that we want to live. The challenge to me in the next year is how do we execute that? And just as an example, Legacy Farms was a great plan as well. It won awards. The town supported it. But I don't think it's turned out anything like what we thought it was going to turn out like. And to me, that so much of that comes down to execution. So while I realize that execution of the master plan is longer than just 1 year, I think there's a lot of opportunity for the planning board specifically to take that and use that as a guide to look at those open parcels of land, to look at the studies that have been done previously, and start to map out an implementation plan for exactly what we want our town to be in the future.
Okay. We are ready for the final question. And Jim, you have the final question, and Ken Wisemantel will answer first.
Yeah, I know we're running a little close on time, so I'll take the liberty of leading the witnesses a little bit on this one. I said I like covering town government in Hopkinton, and one of the reasons is it's one of, I think, maybe 12 towns in the state that has town caucuses, Republicans and Democrats, and especially this time of the year. Do you feel that this system is more prone to creating a them and us atmosphere?
No, I don't believe that it creates them and us type atmosphere. We've always worked together at boards and all the committees I've been elected to. And it's kind of like after town meeting, we're all friends the next day, and we're all neighbors for sure. What a partisan election does for the town of Hopkinton, and I looked at that a couple years ago. This question really has not a lot to do with the planning board. Let me preface it with that. But the turnout in Hopkinton is actually 2 or 3% higher than what a surrounding town would be, because we have more candidates. The two parties recruit candidates for the positions. Competition drives more people to the polls. You get a better selection of candidates for that. A lot of towns around us are lucky if they have one person per slot, and a lot of boards in Holliston and some of the surrounding towns, basically the friends on the board recruit somebody to fill the spot where somebody's retiring, and it gets rubber stamped by a small number of voters.
All right, Mary.
My turn. This is one of those things, like everything in life, that has pros and cons. And I think that Mr. Wiseman walked through some of the benefits of the partisan politics at the local level. I fall sharply on the other side. I think that at the local level, it really doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, if you're on the Cemetery Commission or Parks and Rec, or the Planning Board, or any board or commission. And I do think, well, certainly it is possible, and we've seen it in this campaign, it's very possible to be collegial. I think that it is also possible to have it be a little divisive and difficult. Where I think that we see it sometimes rear its ugly head is in appointments, when appointments are made, and sometimes particular parties are favored in the appointments, filling slots on boards. And I am a firm believer that a broad variety of voices makes the conversation richer, deeper, and more productive. And I think that we need to see a diversity of faces and feelings and leanings and purposes on all the boards and committees.
Okay, Irfan?
Can kind of continue with what Muriel is saying, is that I think it's important to have a diversity of opinion, of thought, of people running any town. Part of the diversity of thought comes from party affiliation, right? So that's, no matter what, I think a certain way, and I bring that to the table. But when it comes to local politics, as I alluded to earlier, I bluntly said it, we're all neighbors, and we all have the same thing, the same interest in mind here, in that we all want to do what's best for the town. It's just, what are we all going to bring to the table? And from that perspective, I think, having Democrats and having Republicans working together, I like to look at it as an example for the rest of the country to follow.
All right, Gary?
So I'm staunchly opposed to it. I think the nature of a two-party system is that it has a very polarizing effect. It pulls most of us that are somewhere in the middle towards one side or the other. And again, as others have said, at a local level, I just don't think there's any need or any benefit or any value to that. And so even if there's a 2 to 3% increase in voting turnout for us, I don't know that study, but I'd find it hard pressed to say that that's even statistically relevant. And at the end of the day, for me, we all want the same thing, and in something like the planning board, I personally just don't see what our political positions has to do with proper planning for our town.
Okay, Amy?
Yeah, I think I would say that I am in favor of nonpartisan local elections, like most of the state has. I think it's about 12 out of 351 communities have the partisan caucuses still. And over 50% of our Hopkinton voters are unenrolled voters, and I think it makes it hard to run if you're not a part of a party. And so I think we would benefit from having a lot of, many unenrolled people in our elected offices as well. And I think it would be okay to remove that designation from the ballot. Let's see. I do believe it requires a special act of the legislator to change in every town, and I think it was Sturbridge that did it recently. So it's a big hurdle, and I imagine that the two parties might fight to stop it. So I don't know if we could pass that in Hopkinton, but I would be in favor. Where I grew up in Indiana, it's much more partisan than in Massachusetts. You can't even be an unenrolled voter. You have to be registered in a party in order to vote. And I really appreciated when I moved here that you could be unenrolled and that you could choose every year if you wanted to vote in the Democratic primary or the Republican primary, or Green or Libertarian or whatever you felt like.
All right. Well, I have good news. The questions are over. It's now time for a closing statement. You'll have up to 2 minutes. Of course, it could be less. We'll start off with Muriel Kramer for the closing statements.
So I found a little quote that I wanted to start with by Aldo Leopold. It says, "Examine each question in terms of what is ethically and aesthetically right, as well as what is economically expedient. A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise." And that kind of sums up what I hope that the planning board will be about, what all of town government will be about appreciating the many tensions that exist and naturally exist within development and preservation, great schools and lower taxes, encouraging business, reducing traffic, speeding up traffic and reducing traffic. The questions are complicated, and we come up with a better process and better answers with the more voices and the more people that we bring into the process. So I hope that it's my goal to make sure that the residents of Hopkinton are really at the table at the planning board, if I'm lucky enough to be elected, and that they really know that their voice has been heard and accommodated and integrated into the work of the planning board. I've lived in town with my husband and my 6 kids for 25 years. I appreciate so much of what everybody appreciates: the fine schools, the beautiful town, the charming small town feel, even as I think that small town feel feels a little threatened. And I think that Hopkinton is worth investing in. Hopkinton is worth fighting for, and we shouldn't apologize to anybody about wanting to hold on to what is really great about this town. At the same time, understanding that there's always a give and take, and we have to make accommodations, and we have to accommodate change. Thank you.
Irfan Asrullah.
There's a lot of talent in this room, on this board, at this table, and I think that Hopkinton is in good hands. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected, then I think I will have something to bring to the table that will only enhance the planning board. I think everyone here has Hopkinton's best interests in mind. And it's really, what is it that you bring to the table to benefit the town? How are you going to do that? I think that I have qualifications. I have a background in environmental law. I've worked with the state at the Department of Environmental Protection. I currently have my own legal practice where I'm practicing environmental law as well as real estate law. I think that goes hand in hand with being able to work on the planning board. I think that's something that would be desirable, and I think most people would think that that is something that qualifies me. I don't want to say anything bad about anyone here. I think everyone here, and those who are not here, would do the town a service and will do their best job. I just like to think that I bring something to the table that others don't.
Okay. Gary Trent.
You know, as we look towards the future of the planning board, there's a lot of work to do. Some of the things we've talked about today: finishing up Legacy Farms, Downtown Quarter Project. You know, we have a very a vocal community with regards to growth. There's a lot to do. And similar to what Irfan had said, to me, I look at this from a perspective of, what do I bring to the board? What would I bring to the board if fortunate enough to be elected? And I think there's a couple of things that I want to point out. First and foremost, I bring a fresh perspective, and while I may be new to some of this, I've had a lifelong interest in planning. You know, even dating back to high school, I was looking at urban planning and architecture programs to study, and that's something that I've always stayed very close to. I have a degree in civil engineering. I have my MBA. All things that I think play well to this. I mean, the ability to understand and interpret and evaluate the proposals, to challenge the engineers that come to the planning board. I think all that is really important. From business school, it's about leadership and influence and working with others, and those are things that I bring to the table. You know, I was a little bit, in some ways, I found it interesting as we talked about the existing planning board and the number of unanimous votes. That scares me a little bit. I think that we need to have some tension. There needs to be some dialogue. Not everybody should agree. These are complicated issues that our town is faced with. And to me, it's a little concerning that if everybody on the planning board agrees the majority of the time, that's a concern. So, you know, for me, I'm someone that I'm very comfortable challenging someone's position. I'll challenge engineers. I'll challenge my elected officials. And at the same time, if a member of the planning board, I want to be challenged, because I think at the end of the day, that's how we bring better outcomes to our town.
Okay, Amy.
Everyone's been so off the cuff, I'm going to be a little bit more just reading my statement here, but I'd like to thank the Hopkinton Independent for organizing tonight's event, and the staff and volunteers here at HCAM. We are truly fortunate to have such a relevant and active cable access channel. Not all towns are as lucky. But I'm a hard worker. I do my research. I have a long history of involvement with the town and schools. The planning board has more influence on shaping our town than perhaps any other board. And this is a critical time in Hopkinton due to the rapid growth and development we're experiencing. During the campaign process, I'm reaching out to residents from all parts of town, lifelong residents and newcomers, and the number one concern I've heard from everyone is that the town is growing too quickly, or at least they fear that it's growing too quickly for our town services to handle. I don't have all the answers, but I believe it's important to have a planning board that better reflects the priorities of the town population as a whole. My husband Tim and I have lived in Hopkinton for 13 years. We own a modest 130-year-old home in the center of Hopkinton, and we enjoy walking in the downtown and on the center trail. We have 3 children, grades 11, 9, and 6, who all walk to the Hopkinton Public Schools. I have a BA from UMass Amherst, and I currently work as the webmaster for the Wellesley Public School District. I've held many volunteer roles in the town over the years, and at the moment I'm serving as the chair of the Historic District Commission and a member of the Design Review Board, which is an advisory board to the Planning Board. I'm a founding member of EHOP, where I've served as the board member since 2007. I also volunteer regularly with Boy Scout Troop 1, the Hopkinton Middle School Drama Club, and Girl Scout Troop 65040. It is important to have planning board members who are knowledgeable, informed, and actively engaged with the residents. My communications background, technical, and research skills will be a good complement to the skill sets of the other board members. I would like to bring my experience, my love for the town, work ethic, and attention to detail to the planning board to ensure that we're growing in the best manner for all of us. I'll work hard to stay on top of the issues, and I will bring some balance and fresh perspective to the planning board, and I respectfully ask for your vote this coming Monday, May 15th.
All right, Ken?
I've lived at 145 Ash Street for 36 years. Hopkinton's population has almost tripled since I've moved here. For 25 years, I've been actively involved in the infrastructure of Hopkinton and in managing growth. The values that attracted the Weissmantle family to Hopkinton 36 years ago are still present today. Our high school is ranked number 3 in the Commonwealth. We're the 4th safest town. Our bond rating is AAA. Our town finances are so positive that we're doing a second underwrite. Our property values are high. People want to move to Hopkinton. We're building needed infrastructure for the library, DPW, and elementary school. We're scheduled to start the Main Street Corridor Road reconstruction with state funds in the spring of 2019. Our water, sewer, and road infrastructure is in good condition. Our commercial property values have increased 50% in the last 10 years, creating new places to shop, eat, and receive services. Obviously, we've managed our growth well. I'm here to ask you to re-elect me to the Planning Board. Why should you vote for me? 4 reasons: community service and expertise, transparency, vision and leadership, and my engineering background. My key goals to manage the growth are implement the new master plan, attract new businesses to lower taxes, ensure Legacy Farms development fulfills their commitments, revitalize downtown, encourage open space and recreation land, improve traffic corridors and sidewalks. I've been working on all of these and would like to continue working on these. I ask for your vote for the vision, leadership, and expertise that I bring to your planning board. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all for participating. Did everyone have fun? That will do it for tonight's planning board debate. I would like to thank our candidates for joining us, as well as our in-studio and at-home viewers, the HCAM staff and crew, our panelists from the Hopkinton Independent, Michelle Murdoch and Jim Kleinkoff, and everyone who helped put together tonight's debate. The polls are open 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. Monday, May 15th. All Hopkinton precincts vote at the Hopkinton Middle School Brown Gymnasium. Don't forget to get out and vote. We hope that this program helped get you ready for the election. For all of us at HCAM, I'm Tom Nappy. Thank you for watching and have a great night.